Okay, so I want to just remind you of a concept that we started off with at the beginning. We talked about elements of geography, including physical elements and cultural elements. And so this is a chapter where where tends to highlight the cultural geography elements a bit. And taking a little bit deeper look at it, that there is a concept called the cultural landscape. And this is a concept that was pioneered by a geographer from UC Berkeley, who at the time there was a type of geography called environmental determinism. Environmental determinism was the idea that the landscape shaped the culture of people. And it was kind of what we might call it was controversial. It was associated with colonialism and also, frankly, a lot of racist ideas about different parts of the world. But the cultural landscape was a different way of looking at it, that it was about how people and the landscape interact with each other. And the idea is that humans adapt to their natural environments, that they exploit opportunities, and they deal with extremes. And so if you recall from the climate lecture, that this is an area of extremes, and people over time have had to deal with those extremes. And part of the result of dealing with those extremes was the emergence of irrigation in parts of this world. And where you had that, these are called cultural hearths. We've discussed a couple of cultural hearths in the Americas, in Mesoamerica and the Andes, but we're going to discuss a few more now. So we have a couple. We have Mesopotamia, it's the Fertile Crescent region in the countries of Iraq and nearby. And we also have the Nile Valley. And we're going to be also talking about West Africa next week. But for these two, we're going to focus on Mesopotamia, Nile Valley. And the idea is that culture diffused or was relocated from these areas to other parts of the world. And that's what's sort of indicated by these arrows. So let's just back up and recap a little bit. Just to give you a timeline, these cultural hearths emerged at different places at different times. And we had amongst the oldest are the ones in this part of the world, Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt, which are nearly 5,000 to 6,000 years old. So let's just back up and recap a little bit. We've talked about the Paleolithic age before, the Stone Age, during parts of the Pleistocene, where hunting and gathering was a predominant mode of production of people, that people had to rely on a large area of land to forage and find food for themselves. And one big change in human populations was the Neolithic, or the agricultural revolution, where domestication came about. And this raised the carrying capacity and caused a lot more people to be able to live in proximity to each other. And these are some of the areas where that came about. So the Nile Valley and Mesopotamia are two cultural hearths where that domestication occurred. Let's zoom in on a couple of them. Mesopotamia is known as the land between the rivers. And I do want you to know these rivers. It's the Tigris and Euphrates. These are mostly in the modern day country of Iraq, but they extend also through parts of Syria, or the border of Syria, into the country of Turkey. Now, again, because of the dryness of this part of the world, river resources become much more important because of the scarcity of water. This is an image showing archaeological sites in Iraq and Syria, and parts of Turkey. And you can see a lot of ancient cities that developed along the Tigris and Euphrates. Here's an image showing some irrigation along the Tigris River in the northern edge in Turkey. So here the water is being diverted and used to grow food. The next cultural hearth is in Egypt, or in the Nile River Valley. And you had, again, associated with the river, one in particular, the Nile. And one thing about the Nile is that it provided two things. The gift of the Nile is not just the water, but it is also nutrients that are brought from deep within Africa and are used to fertilize the soil along this ribbon and the delta of the Nile River. And one thing about the Nile, though, that it is extremely dry as soon as you get out of that ribbon of soil that's irrigated, that the nearby areas are extremely arid and dry. So this is an image showing the Nile River from an airplane. You can see this ribbon of green right along the edge. This is where the people live. And if you get a little bit beyond there, conditions get very difficult. And just to kind of wrap this part up, that we have these cultural hearths that are associated with water resources. And there's a concept from the chapter that I want to highlight called hydraulic civilization theory. That this is the idea that these cultural hearths came about primarily because of the control of irrigation resources. So you have a city that's a center of control, and you have a hinterland, part of its functional region, which is where the crops are grown. And the cities themselves would control the areas where the crops are grown by controlling irrigation resources. And they would organize the populations to develop these resources, and they became centers of control in this part of the world in ancient times. Now, some places, including parts of North Africa and also in Iran, which is where they were first developed, they didn't have rivers, but they found other ingenious ways of developing water resources, including something called canals. Canals are a type of well that are drilled into the side of a mountain. So here you have the water table. Normally, like where we are in Fresno, what we do is we drill wells down to the water table and then use electrical or diesel pumps to get the water out. And back when we didn't have diesel pumps or electricity, what people would do, if you look at this water table, it actually will bend with the contours of the mountain. And so what people would do would be to build these long tunnels into the side of the mountain. They actually had to dig downward and then tunnel in from the sides from these access shafts. They would tap the water table horizontally rather than vertically, and then the water would slowly flow out and irrigate an area of land. And the water itself would move by gravity rather than by some type of external power source. Here's a schematic. You have people would tunnel down, they would get to the water table, and then they would have these other shafts where they would dig down and continue to tunnel along. And then finally you have an outlet and then an area of irrigated land. And the water would just run by gravity out to this area.